we'll get started. If you have your cell phone, and I always do this, so I remind myself to put it on mute. And this is the Interim Joint Committee on State Government. And I will chair, and Robbie Mills, Senator Mills, will be the co-chair, and Representative Miller is the other co-chair. Secretary, please call the roll.
Senator Alvarado.
Here.
Senator Harper Angel. Senator McDaniel. Senator McGarvey. Senator Nemes.
Present.
Senator Schroeder. Senator Southworth. Here. Senator Storm. Here. Senator Thayer. Here. Senator Wheeler. Here. Representative Blanton. Representative Bowling. Representative Cantrell. Representative Decker.
Present.
Representative Duplessis. Representative Fisher.
Here.
Representative Flood. Representative Gooch.
Here.
Representative Graham. Representative Heath. Here. Representative Heverin.
Present.
Representative Herron.
Here.
Representative Imes. Representative Johnson.
Here.
Representative Cook.
Here.
Representative Derek Lewis. Representative Scott Lewis.
Here.
Representative Maddox.
Here.
Representative Mentor.
Here.
Representative Moser. Representative Nemes.
Here.
Representative Scott. Representative Smith.
Here.
Representative Stevenson. Representative Tate.
Here.
Representative Tipton.
Here.
Representative Upchurch.
Here.
Representative Weber.
Here.
Representative Wheatley.
Here.
Representative Miller.
Here.
Senator Mills.
I'm here.
Representative Bratcher.
I'm here. So first off, we need to approve the minutes of the September 27th meeting. Do I hear a motion? Second, and any objection? So the minutes of September 27th have been approved. You know, this issue we're going to do first, water fluoridation is something I used to think was a conspiracy, and I'm not convinced either way right now, but there was a young lady sitting at the table that came and spoke, and she made a compelling case that this is something we should continue to look at. And then we got two well-respected state reps at the table. So you guys introduce yourselves and your guests, and the floor is yours to start talking about this issue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going State Representative Mark Hart, 78th House District, and I'm going to start with Dr. Call here and let my guests introduce themselves for the record.
My name is Jack Call, otherwise known as John, and I'm from Louisville, Kentucky. I've been a practicing dentist for 45 years, and I have concerns about the water fluoridation issue that I'll share with you later.
State Representative William Lawrence.
Philip Adkins, Water Treatment Plant Superintendent, Morehead Utility Plant Board.
Hello, my name is Cindy Batson. I am a registered nurse and a mother of three, and I am here today. On your sheet, you'll have Mayor Smith was supposed to be speaking. Unfortunately, at the last minute, he couldn't join us, so I'm here representing Cynthiana and Mayor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to turn this over here in a minute to our guest. As you all listen to the testimony today, I want everybody to keep in mind the bill that we've prepared is not a bill to prohibit the use of fluoride in the state of Kentucky. It's simply a bill to undo an unfunded mandate and let the local governing bodies that produce the water, or boards in some cases, have the decision and make the decision for the people that are drinking the water or whether or not they want fluoride in the water. And with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Representative Lawrence for a few quick comments and then to our guest.
Quick comments. He emphasized on that. Again, my name's William Lawrence. When Mark had come to me, Representative Hart come to me, and Cindy had come to me about the bill, having worked in the water and wastewater industry for the last 10 years and still do a lot of contract work for these entities, it was something I was pretty passionate about. I remember when I first started working at the water district in Mason County and walking into the plant, changing out these fluoride tanks began to make me raise a lot of questions. And I'll say this, after doing it, seeing the corrosion that it causes to the tools, to the lines, to the tanks, the very tanks that it comes in, I made the decision not to allow my children. I have 3 kids myself, and I do not allow my kids to drink tap water simply because of the fluoride that I've seen the effects of it in the plant. So that's why I got on board with this bill, and I'm here today to support them in any way that I can and look forward to hearing their testimony.
All right. First, thank you for the opportunity to come and share with you today. The fluoride that we feed in our tap water in this state and in this country is not pharmaceutical grade fluoride. It comes in the form of either hydrofluoric acid, which is what my utility uses, or it comes as sodium fluoride. In either case, this is all sourced either here in the U.S. or from China, and in either case, when these come in, the packaging that these come in come with hazard pictograms. One is the skull and crossbones, for acute toxicity. The other is the corrosive pictogram. One of the documents that I supplied in advance to the committee was the safety data sheet from the manufacturer that we source our fluoride from. If you haven't looked over that, I'd just recommend you maybe check that out sometime. It goes on for several pages about how hazardous this is, and one of my objections to feeding it is the fact that my employees and I, it's the exposure hazards to it. In 2017, as a utility, we ceased using chlorine gas as our primary disinfectant, and once we did that, the fluorosilicic acid that we feed now is the nastiest, most hazardous thing that we feed, and the most dangerous thing that we handle at the water plant. And it really is nasty stuff. You can see, you come visit my plant, you can see where spills have occurred before. It eats holes through concrete, through brick, very corrosive to metals. It really has no benefit to the water treatment process. I would feel more comfortable about feeding it if it actually improved water quality, but it doesn't. Quite the opposite. It actually works against us a little bit. When fluoride in the water comes into contact with the chlorine that we feed, the sodium hypochlorite, there's an exothermic chemical reaction that actually happens there in the water, where actually some of that chlorine actually reverts back to sodium or back to salt, which is an additional demand, which means we have to feed more chlorine to overcome that. But it also causes scaling inside pipes. I know this personally because a little over a month ago we had to dig up our parking lot to replace a chlorine injection line that had become completely stopped up with the scaling. So there are some chemistry consequences to feeding it as well. Another drawback is the cost, and it is an unfunded mandate. The other document that I provided to this committee ahead of today's meeting was a breakdown of what it cost our utility last year to feed fluoride, and with the increases in chemicals that we're seeing right now, a projected cost for the current budget year will come in close to $30,000, and it works out to almost 10% of our chemical feed budget for the entire year. It's a good bit of money, and a lot of money that we would like to put in other areas into system maintenance and repairs. It's not really the true cost, though, of feeding fluoride because of the reaction that it has with other chemicals. It is a strong acid, and so it brings down the pH of the water, which means that we feed more of our sodium hydroxide to increase that pH than we ordinarily would have to do. It's a demand on the chlorine, it's a demand on the sodium permanganate that we feed. So we have to feed more of those chemicals into the water to overcome that. And all these are objections that I and others in the water industry have to feeding fluoride. But the one that sort of outweighs all of them to me and to others that I've talked to is really the ethics of feeding it, because it serves no purpose in water treatment as far as improving water quality. It actually works against that to some degree. What it really is just mass medication. It's a one-size-fits-all approach. And so at my plant every day, we are medicating, upwards of around 40,000 people. And we do that statewide at all of our treatment plants. Whether people need it or not, or whether they want it or not in their water. Be happy to answer any questions later on that you may have, and thank you for your time today.
I don't think I need to speak right now.
I'd like to acknowledge, for the record, there were posted a couple letters from the one from the Kentucky Public Health Association, another from several groups, Kentucky Dental Association, which I'm a proud member of, as well as Delta Dental and even the Louisville Water Company. Anyway, very generalized letters talking about how beneficial water fluoridation has been as a public health measure. And I'd like to point out for any physicians in the group, I know there's a senator here who's a physician, probably familiar with the Cochrane Reviews, which is a body of information that's published on various scientific matters. And the most recent one in 2015 regarding water fluoridation points out, and I quote, "There is very little contemporary evidence that has evaluated the effectiveness of water fluoridation for the prevention of caries, which are cavities." And it goes on to say, the available data come predominantly from studies conducted prior to 1975. So there's going to be references for my dental colleagues, perhaps, about varying reductions in dental decay rates over the years due to water fluoridation. If I could draw your attention to the slide before you, it shows the downward trend starting in 1975 of tooth decay in countries without water fluoridation. And you can see that downward trend, which is similar to the downward trend we see in countries that utilize water fluoridation. Now, most of the countries in Europe do not fluoridate their water supply. There are a couple that take the route to avoid that mass medication issue without informed consent of putting it in the salt and leave it a freedom of choice for the individual citizens to medicate themselves as necessary, perhaps with the guidance of their own healthcare practitioners. And that's what's missing in a lot of this whole idea of the informed consent issue. Now, we might want to reference our esteemed science organizations such as CDC, FDA, and others in regards to the alleged benefits of this so-called public health measure. But if one were to take the time to really investigate what's going on here and what's been going on for many years, there is a lot of, I believe, poor data that's been submitted. And again, the other side will say, well, those dentists like myself that like 2 years ago in the hearing that we had a bibliography of numerous recent studies in the last 5 years showing a decrease in IQ in children who are living in fluoridated water communities. And these studies were published in peer-reviewed medical scientific journals. Most dentists aren't very familiar with those unless they really look hard. And these studies were also funded by NIH, which doesn't make a habit of funding poorly designed studies. And so we've got this alleged benefit, which is extremely questionable, even though all these authorities recommend it. And then on the other hand, we've got some new science that's coming forward, calling into question the wisdom of exposing particularly children, pregnant women, and susceptible populations that are at higher risk of damage from a neurotoxin that's consumed as it is through water fluoridation. And for example, a lot of people don't realize this, but a newborn infant that's on formula, the water that's mixed with that formula should not be fluoridated water. And yet, how poor of a job we've done at educating young moms about that very issue. It's just unconscionable. So I urge the members of this committee to take this into consideration, even though this has to do more with this freedom of local governments. But again, let's get rid of this mandate that is ignoring the precautionary principle that those of us in healthcare should always have in the forefront of our considerations when we are treating our patients, and particularly from a public health standpoint, in which we're doing this mass medication again without informed consent. The other study that I included some graphs in were relative to showing that in Calgary, Canada, where they stopped fluoridating the water supply, that that there is actually an increase in the decay rate after that water fluoridation was terminated. Well, the slide here, the one to the right, will show, and again, the study that published this concern that there is an increase in decay rates when fluoridation was stopped. It left out data relative to what was going on before the cessation, although there was what I'm pointing out here in this graph is a subsequent study of scientists who were critical of the flawed study that purportedly showed a decrease, purportedly showed an increase in tooth decay when fluoridation was stopped. Well, that rate had been going back to, if you look at the survey and the graph on the far left side, 2006, it's showing a lower rate of decay as opposed to the far right. You see the upward trend, and you see two arrows. One is a city of Edmonton, Canada, that did not stop their water fluoridation, whereas in Calgary they did. But you see in both an upward trend. The decay rates were going up regardless of water fluoridation, regardless of whether the fluoridation had been stopped in Calgary, and that's what some of my colleagues will raise your concern and doubts, perhaps, that, oh my gosh, if we create a situation in which we allow local communities to stop fluoridating their water, that there's going to be a problem. Ain't so. So I'd like to stop at that point in case there's any questions for any of us here. Was that thorough? Okay.
Okay.
Yes. Oh, okay, go ahead,
Okay.
Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate you bringing this information before us. I try and focus my decisions on evidence-based decisions.
Absolutely.
And I'm been reading through some of the material here, and some things that concern me. In particular, are the impacts on children from the use of fluoride. I believe it's a toxic to their teeth. Fluorosity, is that the term?
Fluorosis.
Fluorosis, okay.
Yes.
And I'm also reading about the term, the impacts of the fluoride use on things like ADHD,
Yes.
loss of IQ as much as over 5 points.
Yes.
One study that's mentioned here shows that fluoride has a greater use than lead poisoning or preterm birth. Could you comment a little bit about these studies?
Sure.
In the we always want to know who's got the most credentials. Who's behind these studies that I'm referencing, and what are their credentials?
Yes. Well, the IQ studies, I think, are the most concerning. And in fact, last time when I testified, I closed with a statement: sure, teeth are important, but so are thyroid glands, kidneys, liver, and brains. Brains cannot be repaired, but teeth can. So the credentials of those individuals, they're PhD scientists at various institutions. They're typically multi-centers were involved with those studies, and there were numerous publications. And again, these were in peer-reviewed journals. and one of which was even JAMA, JAMA Pediatrics, it's Journal of American Medical Association. And their editors, when the paper was submitted, they were very, I guess, suspicious at first as to what are we dealing with here. Everybody knows that water fluoridation is the greatest thing ever. And here they're looking at this data, and after the peer review process was completed, a very rigorous process, what had been submitted was shown to be very good science, well-researched science. And the editors even had the rare instance in providing an editorial in that journal issue that pretty much called into question what we've always thought of as being something very, very helpful to our population. We need to look at that, look at it again very seriously. And so various other studies, concerning the ADHD, again, similar credentialed individuals with universities, good research, good quality research coming out of those universities, and again, good reputable journals. So those are the kind of things that I've read in my dental college. People come to me and say, "You're a dentist. How can you be against this?" I got to, hey guys, read the literature. Are you reading it? And just don't come back with this reflex of, oh, that's junk science or poorly designed. You think the NIH would have been funding that?
I actually have a comment on that too, if it's okay. If you're looking for actual names, there was a gentleman by the name of Dr. Bruce Lamphere, and he recently gave federal testimony about the toxicity effects of fluoride available at levels in drinking water. And that's important because we know that fluorine is toxic, but we've been told for decades that at levels in drinking water, it's safe and it's effective. So Dr. Bruce Lamphere, if you want to look him up, he's actually instrumental in our global policy on lead. We stopped adding lead to gasoline and paint long after other countries did, and he was sounding the alarms then. Dr. Linda Birnbaum, she has also made publications, she's written editorials, and she was the chief of the NIH for years. So if you're looking for names, those are reputable sources as well.
Cindy, did you want to say anything? I have a statement. I know one thing that kind of triggered me on this, if that's the right word, triggered, is Kentucky is only one of 13 states that have this mandatory from one end of the state to the other, the entire state. Is that true?
That's true. 1 in 13 states that require fluoride be added to drinking water. There are other states who do. They have different types of regulations on their books. Like if a community is going to add it or take it away, they let their public health departments know. But Kentucky has the most stringent regulation on water fluoridation. And that's why we have 99.8% of our water is fluoridated. It's something like for every, all water systems shall elevate fluoride in drinking water that serve a population of 3,000 or more. And if they have the pumping systems and mechanisms, it's 1,500 or more. It is required by the state. Local governments have no control over it. And so what our bill does, and we actually changed the language last year to better reflect the needs of our water producers. I live in Harrison County. We buy our water from Cynthiana Water. I've been in touch with Cynthiana Water. So we wanted to make sure, and other entities. So we wanted to make sure that we knew exactly where that authority lied. So if you look at the bill, it gives the authority to choose optional water fluoridation programs to be decided by governing bodies of water producers. So if there's a water producer, like Moorhead Water, for instance, and they sell water to consecutive lines, those consecutive lines are beholden to the decisions, be it a city commission or a water board, or even if they choose to put it on a ballot referendum to actually let the people who are consuming this decide. It just takes the authority away from the state. You guys are here for 30 and 60 days, whereas, as the science becomes available, we just have to wait for another legislative session rather than having these conversations at home where it is closest to our families.
One other question, then we have a series of a few people want to ask questions. Is bottled water like you buy at the convenience store? Does it have fluoride in it?
Most of it does not. This would actually be a great question for Phil to answer. We've talked about this. Oftentimes, bottled water isn't as closely regulated as tap water. I would prefer to drink my tap water at home. We don't, because we filter fluoride out of it. So we have a reverse osmosis filter, and we prefer our tap water because of how closely monitored the purity and quality is. Bottled water is oftentimes from a tap source, a municipal water source. You can read on the back of it. Sometimes it says that it is purified by reverse osmosis. Sometimes it doesn't. There are a lot of people who avoid fluoride in their drinking water by drinking bottled water. And I mean, long term, I don't think that's the answer. Asking people to purchase their own water. So my family, we still shower and bathe in fluoridated water. We flush our toilets with it. We wash our clothes with it. So my community, my city is paying to add a chemical to our drinking water that we try to avoid and we use for other things. So I think that's a consideration too when you think about this. Do you have anything to add to that? Okay.
Is that it?
Yeah, I think
Representative
so.
Blanton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for your presentation. I apologize for my tardiness today. This is a great approach to something I say that we're very bad at in government, and that is we tend to do a one-size-fits-all across this state, and different communities, different cities have different needs and wants. And this allows them to have control themselves at each local water group. And I think this is a great thing. I have my concerns with fluoride as well. Not to tell my age, but I remember in elementary school, they used to make us come. They would come once a week, and they would bring gallon jugs, and they'd put fluoride in a cup, and we'd have to rinse our mouth. And we were told specifically, do not swallow this. Spit it back out in your cup when you get done, and it tasted awful. I mean, we'd try to make them think we put it in our mouth when we didn't, but I'll digress. But the point being, they were like, don't swallow, but now we're saying, okay, it's safe to consume, though, in our waters, right? When always before, they were telling us not to consume this, and that was before municipal water become, in my area anyways, as available as it is today. And then to the bottled water issue, my household is one of those that we buy bottled water by the cases, and I have them stacked in the garage. Or people have filters at home now. Very few people drink water straight from the tap. And if you've ever had any kind of water issues at home and you have a broken water line, you were talking about at work, you're going to see the corrosion that comes from not only fluoride, but the sodium hydroxide and everything else that's put into our water system, how it corrodes the inside of your water line. You probably wouldn't drink from the tap if you've seen what the inside of your water lines look like. So why do we want to put these chemicals in our bodies? And so I'm fully supportive. I think Representative Hart, Representative Lawrence, if you bring this piece, and I assume you will, I would love to be a sponsor in allowing the local water companies to have that control, the local water boards, as to whether or not they use fluorination. Thank you.
And I'll add to, we just got the draft finished, so the BR for next session is 278. But in your packet, you have a copy of last year's bill that we filed, and it's identical.
Representative Heath.
Just a comment. Those of us who do not live in areas where, we can buy water, we just drink well water. I've grew up in the country drinking well water. I didn't go to the dentist till after I graduated high school. And I think those of us who have grown up without drinking any treated water have fared just as well.
Representative Decker.
Yes, thank you. Thank you all for bringing this today. I've had various constituents, actually for the past couple of years, talking about this, and so I was really interested to see what you had to say today. I do have a question. In your first slides that appeared, I think they came from a Harvard Public Health magazine, why do you think, or did the article explain why the countries without fluoride fared just as well or also trended down? Is the first question. The second question is it looks like 2025 our numbers started going back up, and it seems it doesn't go much further than that. But why did we go back up if we were treating our water with fluoride, and why did the other countries follow our trend down?
It's important to understand there are a lot of variables that can
Well,
impact
sure.
these types of results. Generally, from what I've read in the literature, is the the downward trend that started probably about post-World War II had to do with just general improvement of personal hygiene, diets, introduction of antibiotics. You know, one of the main factors in caries rate are the bacterial levels in the mouth, certain types of bacteria. And there's never been a controlled study that involved looking at the use of antibiotics, particularly when they were introduced back in the 50s and 60s, and continually is ramped up in the frequency of use for ear infections, all kind of things in children, and the impact that has. So that's just an example of one variable. The other one is the use of fluoridated toothpaste, which grew tremendously through particularly the 70s and 80s throughout the world. And there have been studies that have suggested that indeed that is the main source. In fact, there's been arguments. It used to be back in the 60s and 70s, we thought there was like an internal systemic effect that the fluoride got into the forming teeth of the child to make them stronger, like a shield of armor on them. And now we understand that any kind of potential benefit of fluoride in the water is more of a topical effect. And indeed, any kind of fluoride, like for example in toothpaste. So again, a lot of variables, but generally people are taking better care of themselves. And dental education and all that to the public has helped.
Thank you. I
diets.
guess my question wasn't as clear as I needed it to be.
Okay.
But did this magazine article
Right.
draw conclusions based on these studies and the trends? Did they say that fluoridation in the water was unnecessary? Or
Yes,
what
that
was the point
that
of
was the
article?
general theme in contrasting these two slides, is that regardless of whether the water is fluoridated or not, there's been this general downward trend. You're
Thank
going
you.
to see all these little variations because of all those variables.
Representative Wheatley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, gentlemen and lady, for being here for this, what I find fascinating topic. And thanks to the reps for bringing it up. Some of this is new to me, but one thing it's not is and Representative Blanton brought this up too, is you may not drink water out of a line that you've seen what the lines actually look like when they're cut open. As a firefighter in our training, they'd show us a 6-inch line, and it would be mostly occluded, you know. And some bigger lines are not like this. But this question is related to the water treatment part of this, and that is, as far as the residue or the calcification and everything that's in the line, do you have any idea what the percentage of that blockage is that is related to fluoride? I mean, we understood when we were trained in firefighting, it was not related to fluoride. It was related to other minerals that get in the water lines. And so is that like a large percentage of do you think, of the blockage?
You know, I really don't know for sure, because it would really depend on each individual water system and their particular water chemistry. It would just be, again, that chemical reaction that would form the salts that could scale up lines. You know, is that does happen for systems that feed sodium hypochlorite and fluoride as well. But a lot of that depends on whether the water from that particular system is corrosive in nature or scale forming in nature. So it's not, wouldn't necessarily be a one size fits all answer for all water systems in the state. They would all be a little bit different.
Yes, and I agree with that. And as Dr. Jack has pointed out, that there's so many confounding factors that could come into really a lot of the things here. But if I may, Mr. Chair, just one brief more, question. The current, I heard that we have 13 states that currently mandate fluoride treatment in our water. Do we know, and usually through the NCSL or one of the other organizations, what the trend is towards going towards more fluoride use or less fluoride use as far as state laws are concerned? Do we have any idea how that's moving?
I think that's one of those things that are rapidly changing as this data comes out. So some laws say it's population based, kind of like we are. So take California, for example, they have this mandate on the books. As their population grows, I want to say their population number is 10,000. So water systems that serve 10,000 people, and I might be wrong there. It's been a while since I looked at that. They initiate water fluoridation. So there are some cities who have never added fluoride to their water, but as people move into it, they begin to. So while that's happening, though, there are other cities across our nation who are voting to take fluoride out of the water. And one that just recently, like in the last few weeks, State College, Pennsylvania, they just stopped adding fluoride to their water. Their city commission got together, they evaluated the science, they had an engineer, a PhD, their mayor, they got together, they looked at it, and they decided that it wasn't best for their community anymore. The EPA is currently on federal trial about their regulation of this practice. They actually have been asked to lower the contaminant level of fluoride in their water for decades, and they haven't responded time and again. So they're on trial. So, you know, it's changing right now. There's really not a great answer for that. Some systems are adding it based on their older laws. Some are taking it away based on current science.
Thank you for that. Thank you all.
I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, it
Thank you
was.
for
Thank
asking.
Senator Southworth.
I was going to ask a question about chlorine, but I think it almost got answered. So I may not have an actual question, but I just want to call out kind of a comment and thank you all so much for being here because this is a fantastic panel. And the information is just a great collection here. I'm not one of those ones that this is new information as a general theme. I was buying fluoride-free toothpaste before they sold in the stores, you know, back when online was a new thing. But this information is extremely helpful for me because I don't know all these details, you know, on the detail side of things. And it just makes a very compelling case that not only addresses the fluoride question, I mean, a lot of questions as I'm thinking about, okay, the definition of public health. When there are pros and cons, you know, should we be making blanket approaches? So I think you're on a fantastic trend. I know I co-sponsored this when I very first came in 2021 in the Senate. If you all do it in the House, then just get it over here fast because I'd love to pass this year. I just don't think there's a reason to sit around forever and wait. But secondly, I also will mention as a side note, I don't talk about it a whole lot, but I worked with my dad in his practice for several years, and one of the things that I actually came out with at one point when we were doing testing, which I saw at various times in patients, but at one point I showed up simultaneously for fluoride and chlorine toxicity. I hadn't been to any swimming pools. I hadn't been to any, you know, trips that you might have been exposed to more weird water or anything like that. And so the big question was, where did I get all this fluoride and chlorine all of a sudden? And I could kind of get the fluoride thing from water maybe, but the chlorine baffled me because I know you can get it from water, but I was like, how did I get more now than later or than before? And so now that you've mentioned if we're adding more chlorine to try to offset the fluoride, we're almost compounding our problems. So I think the fluoride almost would be the hinges where the door could swing on to reduce those, what I'd say, fairly unsafe levels of chlorine as well. It's kind of a two birds with one stone. So I love it. Thanks so much and look forward to passing this year.
And I will mention Senator West over on the Senate side. He's been working with me on this for several years, and when we file something, there will be a companion bill.
Senator Alvarado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that. Couple of questions just based on how the draft is worded. And Mr. Atkins, I know we've just talked recently about Moorhead and building a new plant there for water treatment. And I think during our discussions, it was stated that there's 8 counties that would be directly served. That there would be only one county who would be the one determining if they want to have fluoride in their water or not, correct? With the other 7 that let's say if a new plant is built this passes, 7 of those counties would have no say as to whether or not that water be fluoridated. Is that correct?
I suppose that would depend on how the bill passes. I believe the way it is set up now would be for utility boards or cities, governing agencies over water utilities would be the ones to make that determination. I would even be fine with a ballot referendum. I mean, and if the majority of people in our community wanted to continue to have fluoride in their water, then that takes away the ethical dilemma for me. A ballot referendum for 8 counties might be kind of messy. I don't know how that would happen, but my understanding is the way the bill is currently set up is that the determination would be made, in my case, by the board that governs us, and maybe some input from city council as well.
Yeah, and so that's my point is, I mean, I represent Bath County, who would be buying water from you all, and they wouldn't have a say in this process. It would be decided by people in Moorhead or in Rowan County who would say, we want to have it, or whatever the governing board is. But people in Bath County might say, hey, we want fluoride in our water. And, well, too bad, because they've decided something different. They're not a big enough county to afford their own water supply to do some of those things. And so I know it sounds like it's getting down to the really local level. It isn't. It's just being transferred to another large organization that would oversee some regions, because not every county has its own water supply to make this determination. And so I would warn just to be careful of that. I mean, I've pushed a lot of initiatives here for tobacco to be decided at a very local level, and summarily rejected by the General Assembly. People saying, we're not going to do that. There's lots of bills and thoughts about tetracarbons and underground water supply that people use that poisons people, causes cancers. We've seen Camp Lejeune recently have that very issue. People saying we're not going to restrict it because we use it for cleaning supplies, for greasing engines and different things. And those are supplies we want to use. Fertilizers, lots of things that can poison our communities and poison folks. We could put a lot of restrictions on that I think is a great idea. But if that's the claim for this, there's lots of other things that can fit underneath this. I mean, there's things on tobacco that since I've gotten into office here, that I've pushed, saying we need stricter controls over tobacco use. Let local governments decide if they want to be stricter. And people have said, no, we want a statewide policy. And that's been the kind of the topic we've had at hand. So my concern is just is if we're going to have a brand new plant in Moorhead, 8 counties directly served, but only 1 county gets to call the shot for everybody because they're the ones who has the governing oversight, a lot of folks won't have a say in this process. I think also, one thing I want to also to the doctor, I know I was looking up a lot of the commentary. I know that the Harvard study that I saw from the Cochrane report and Harvard referencing, I think it's important to note the deans of the Harvard School of Medicine, Harvard School of Dental Medicine, Harvard School of Public Health, all have publicly expressed their support for fluoridation. American Academy of Pediatrics, World Health Organization, American Medical Association. Why do you think those folks, if the data is so clear that this is bad for us, why would all those medical organizations, including Harvard, who had these studies that you've claimed, why would they still be supportive of putting fluoride in our water at 0.7 levels?
Well, in my opinion, they're simply ignoring the precautionary principle that I pointed out. And I would also ask, there's this thing called groupthink, and I'm amazed at the number of people that just don't take the time to read the studies. And it can, as a result, take quite a long time to undo that indoctrination that has occurred in our medical and dental training. It's very unfortunate, but it's just the way things are.
Okay, I see. So that's fine. If that's the testimony, is that Harvard University, the deans of School of Medicine, all those folks are all indoctrinated and they're ignoring data, and some of us here have a better understanding. That's fine. It's an opinion. I know there's a lot of people in the medical profession that probably would disagree with that. I know this is controversial.
Absolutely.
Controversial. I know there's lots, because I'm reviewing here studies of European studies done in Singapore of this, looking at it, saying that it does have benefit for that. So again, to be worthy of discussion, it's always good to go back and review to make sure that we're doing things the right way. Obviously, sometimes doing the same things and not questioning that is important. But it is important to note that there are a lot of other very smart people out there as well who know how to interpret studies and data and have differing views on this. So,
well, again, my response on the Cochrane, for example, how they point out the inadequacy of the data, though. And yeah, there's some data there, but if you look at the way those studies were designed, and they were most of these are back in the 50s, 60s, 70s when water fluoridation was becoming a thing. You compare that to the way science is done today as far as the studies, there's no comparison. That's what I'm trying to point out, is that Cochrane has raised that as a legitimate concern. even though they acknowledge, oh yeah, there's evidence out there that water fluoridation can provide some benefit. The question is how good is that evidence? How much bias was selection bias was a horrible problem with a lot of these studies.
Yeah.
We can go on and on about the details.
Sure.
But
I can
point
recite
taken.
Okay, let's.
a few useful studies for background, Mr. Chairman, just really quickly. 2016 study published in the American Journal of Preventive Medicine, National Resource Council 2006 review of fluoride in drinking water, 2009 paper in the European Archives of Pediatric Dentistry, 2014 study in the American Journal of Public Health, 2007 study in the Journal of Dental Research, 1996 study in the Journal of Public Health Dentistry, all supporting these issues.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of data out there that's also current, modern, that also says it still is of some benefit for this purpose. That's my point.
Yeah.
So one study.
Okay, we're going to
great.
bring up two more people that support that.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
I'd like to make one comment. Just to note, Senator Alvarado brought out a good point. 8 counties could possibly have no say in whether or not they're fluoridated. None of the counties have a say right now. Our bill would allow the governing bodies that's producing the water to decide how to decide this issue for themselves. It doesn't say that they are the sole, so they can take input. They could do a local referendum. They could do a number of things. They could have a community forum to get feedback from the counties that would not necessarily have a say. So our bill just takes it to the local level. It doesn't specify how the local water producing bodies would derive at their decision.
All right, we got, thank you, Representative Hart. Mary Ann Birch and Jonathan Rich are going to speak for 15 minutes. And then we got to move on. We've got a very important pilot program to talk about. Good debate. Good debate. Yes, ma'am. Say who you are, who you're with, and the floor is yours. And so where is the doctor? He's on there. Okay. Dr. Rich, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Birch will speak, and then you, okay? Go ahead, Ms. Birch. Turn your mic on, please.
Gotcha. Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Mary Ann Birch. I am representing today, speaking on behalf of the Kentucky Dental Hygienists Association, the professional organization representing dental hygienists. As a dental hygienist who practiced for 42 years, my main focus was prevention of dental disease for my patients. Community water fluoridation has been a very cost-efficient key to dental decay prevention. Fluoride is monitored daily by our State Department of Public Health, having a team of 4 that monitors to maintain the recommended 0.7 parts per million. I'm here to advocate for the dental health of all Kentuckians, but especially children in poor communities who are not able to afford dental care on a regular basis. Water fluoridation is a consistent means to provide prevention of dental decay for them. Without fluoride in the community water supply, it's been proven that dental decay will increase. In 2007, Juneau, Alaska removed fluoride from their water supply. Studies showed that children under 6 experienced 1 additional dental decay procedure per year at a ballpark of $300 more per child. An increased average from 1.5 procedures per year per child to 2.5 procedures per year per child. That's a huge increase. We cannot afford to increase the dental disease both economically and physically. This will impact our poorer communities, especially in historically vulnerable populations in eastern Kentucky. Many, that being 1/3 overall, and 61% of children are covered up by Medicaid, which will increase that cost significantly. There are not enough dentists to provide care for Medicaid patients already because of the low reimbursement rate. Prevention's the best answer. Dental disease causes children to miss school, and dental pain causes them to be distracted when they are present in the classroom. Community water fluoridation has been a safe, reliable, cost-effective preventive measure to keep teeth strong and reduce cavities by at least 25%. Our dental team includes dentists, dental hygienists, and dental assistants who work hard each day to make citizens of Kentucky as healthy as possible with their dental care. Please consider our professional advice and continue to provide consistent fluoride access to our patients in the community water supplies. This is certainly the best use of our taxpayer dollars for the dental health of our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Birch. Dr. Rich?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I really appreciate you allowing me to speak. I also appreciate the opportunity to speak virtually. I am in the office and was unable to get away from a full day of patients today, so appreciate your time. My name is Dr. Jonathan Rich. I'm immediate past president of the Kentucky Dental Association, representing the Kentucky Dental Association and the oral health of the state. I've been a general dentist practicing in Grant County for the past 20 years. I was born and raised in Grant County, and I'm a third-generation dentist here in the community. I'm a fellow of the American International College and the American and the International College of Dentistry, chairman of the Northern Kentucky Health District, and I have a heart for serving those less fortunate, volunteering regularly through donated dental services. This, combined with my experience treating patients of all ages, has placed me in a position to understand the severity and depth of the problem of dental disease in our community and in my beloved state. I'm here to speak today to support mandated fluoridization of water in our state. You know, as dentists, personally, we have been occasionally told we're self-serving. You know, we're in it for the money, and I find this to be very, very false. If this were the case, I would not be speaking here with you today. Removing fluoride from our water source would only serve to increase cavities in the lives of Kentuckians, increasing treatment within our offices. And as dentists, our patients' oral and overall health is our top priority, and preventing disease before it starts is our number one goal. Water fluoridation is considered one of the top 10 public health measures in the 20th century. By some measures, this has decreased the cost of dental care by as much as 50%. Even at the most conservative estimates, every $1 spent on water fluoridation yields $38 in reduced dental cost. The pain and suffering that it has prevented is immeasurable. The single public health measure has done this single public health measure has done more to level the disparities in oral health than any other. We've come a long way since the inquisitive Colorado dentist wanted to learn about the brown stains on his patients' teeth, who were, for the most part, free from tooth decay. Today, more than 70% of the water supplies in the U.S. are optimally fluoridated. This means that only a small amount of fluoride is added to the drinking water, enough to help prevent tooth decay in a manner safe for everyone. In the early years, fluoride was thought to affect only developing teeth. We now know that there's a systemic as well as a topical effect benefiting the entire population. We have the knowledge and we have the technology to utilize this science to enhance our health, especially our dental health. Fluoride occurs naturally in our soils, in our foods. The highest levels of fluoride in food occur in potatoes and carrots. Other foods with high fluoride content are canned vegetables, so the source of fluoride cannot be readily determined. Not only is fluoride in the drinking water, but it's in colas, reconstituted juices, bottled water, and depending on where it's grown, it's even in tea. The amount of fluoride in drinking water is calculated with consideration of all these items. Some wells in Kentucky have naturally occurring fluoride. Kentucky's water supplies are constantly monitored to verify safe levels for our communities. The most common side effect of too much fluoride is dental fluorosis. This condition ranges from either light stains on our teeth to brown stains or even pitting of the enamel. Interesting thing about people with dental fluorosis, they rarely have decay. In my 20 years of patient care, I've never seen really dark pitting of teeth, nor have I seen the pitting of the enamel. Fluorosis affects the developing teeth. 23% of the U.S. population has dental fluorosis, a number which seems a little extreme to me at this point, but most of it is very mild. Again, this is hardening of the tooth structure in order to help prevent the decay. The cases of tooth staining are mild, and usually with bleaching procedures, it is just a cosmetic procedure. The people most susceptible to fluorosis are children less than 3 who have developing permanent teeth. Fluoride in toothpaste is often considered the cause of fluorosis, and the majority of that with children are because young children are using the toothpaste without supervision. So again, back to educating our parents and adults on proper use. While staining of teeth is not cosmetically ideal, in the rarity it occurs, the opposite effect of unsupervised children amassing large amounts of tooth decay are even more detrimental and potentially deadly to the child. There are other ascribed side effects of fluoride in the water, ranging from cancer to lowered IQ. The preponderance of evidence from large cohort studies and systematic reviews does not support the association of these diseases with fluoride water consumption. This is a direct quote from the American Academy of Pediatric Dentistry guidelines for fluoride. It is supported by independent research from the American Dental Association, the U.S. Public Health Service, the United Kingdom's National Institute for Health Research, and the National Health and Medical Research Council of Australia. Europe is actually widely fluoridated, although not always through the water systems, because of how their water comes to them. Fluoride is often added to salt, as iodine is added into our very own salts here in the United States. Fluoride is also added to milk in some countries. In Great Britain and Spain, add fluoride to their water supply. I stated earlier that I have practiced dentistry for 20 years. I have filled, crowned, root canaled, and extracted badly broken teeth amongst all ages. While this may seem enormous or exaggerated, it is what I haven't told you that is important. My patients who live in more rural areas that do not have access to public water systems and rely on well or cistern water, as well as those who only drink bottled water, demonstrate a higher cavity rate than those who have access to public water and consume it. Obviously, this is not a scientific study, but I have continued to see a difference in the oral health of patients who reside in fluoridated areas. In addition to that, since the pandemic, we are continuing, and there is evidence through our coalition that we have seen an increase in decay among all populations based on changes in diet. While early on we associated higher cavity rates with lower socioeconomic persons, this is not the case anymore based on daily habits. As times have improved for all of us over the past 50 years, I believe that diet, especially the ingestion of refined sugars, has had a huge impact on the oral health of Kentuckians. It reinforces in my mind the lack of the ability or knowledge of some patients to make good decisions regarding their teeth, especially their oral health. We cannot ignore 70 years of water fluoridation. We're not talking about 10 years or 20 years, 70 years, including multiple generations within the United States and the world that speak to its effectiveness of this public health measure. In study after study, we have been shown the cost savings in dollars that water fluoridation has afforded our citizens, even in small communities. I recommend to you studies published in peer-reviewed journals. As with many ideas in our society, everyone can find a forum for their beliefs. It is also difficult to sort through all of this information. Peer-reviewed journals give us some protection from this science and require authors to state the shortcomings of their research. Tooth decay is the #1 chronic disease of American children. It is known that 1 in 4 children living below the federal poverty level experience untreated tooth decay, leading to pain, school absences, difficulty in concentration and learning, and a poor personal experience. 40% of Kentucky children are on Medicaid. These children desperately need any help that we can give them to prevent disease. This also expands to all patient populations that can be realized every day of my practice. Let us today not be guilty of removing from our arsenal the one public health measure that has the ability to improve the lives of our fellow Kentuckians, perhaps beyond our ability to measure. I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, and it was good debate. I'm sure we'll be revisiting this in the future. We've got to move on. I promised State Board of Elections 1 hour, so thanks everyone that participated. Ms. Birch, thank you, and Dr. Rich, thank you.
Thank you so much for your time.
Okay, if y'all guys want to come up, Karen and Jennifer and water? Oh. Okay. We're going to go ahead and get started. Anybody that's discussing out there, go to the hallway, please. Okay, we got a real important program getting ready to come up, and we're going to discuss it. And so, please, at the table, announce yourself, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Chairman, members of the committee, it's an honor to be here with you. My name's Jennifer Morell. I'm a co-founder of an organization called the Elections Group. We provide support to state and local election officials. But I'm here today because I spent about 10 years running local elections in both Utah and Colorado. I was instrumental in Colorado's adoption and implementation of the first statewide risk limiting audit. We did that in November of 2017. And after that audit, I fielded a lot of phone calls from other states and other officials and organizations wanting to understand how risk limiting audits worked, how they could implement them in their own jurisdictions. And I realized that there was a gap. There was the academic literature that folks could read, but there really wasn't any resource or guidance documents that could help folks. And so I decided to fill that gap. Over the years, I've authored 4 guides around risk limiting audits. It's called the Knowing It's Right series. I've provided training at both state and national election conferences, and I've provided advice and resources and counsel to states just like Kentucky who were implementing risk limiting audits or piloting risk limiting audits. So I'm going to give you about a 15-minute overview on audits and risk limiting audits, and then I'll open up for questions. So I'm actually going to start with a question that I think is important to think about before we talk about the specifics of an RLA, and that is, why do we audit an election? What do we want out of an election audit? So any audit, whether that's a post-election audit or some other type of audit, should have a way to detect voting system errors, whether that's human error, misconfiguration, manipulation. It needs to have a way to provide accountability to voters. And often those audits can act as a deterrent to fraudulent activity. Audits are a way that we can assure votes were issued and counted and reported accurately and provide feedback for process improvement. So why risk limiting audits? And I'll probably refer to it as RLA. Risk limiting audits is a mouthful. An RLA is nationally recognized as a reliable method to validate the integrity of your voting equipment, verify the accuracy of your results, and detect and correct outcome-changing errors in vote tabulation. And by that I mean, did the winner actually win? Do we have a way to validate that? And it also is an efficient way to audit. We'll talk a little bit more about that. So the first thing I usually get asked is, what is a risk limiting audit? What does that mean? So I've broken the definition down into 4 sections. Risk limiting audit is a post-election tabulation audit, and that's important because it happens at the end of the election. It examines a random sample of ballots, and that examination is done by humans. It provides us with a statistical level of confidence that the outcome of the election is correct. So historically, many states have laws that require what we refer to as a traditional audit. So it might be a fixed percentage of precincts or voting districts or machines where ballots are selected and hand tallied and compared to the results. What's different about risk limiting audits is that all ballots from every precinct, every machine, all have an equally likely chance of being selected for audit. And that's important, right? Because if there's an issue with a piece of equipment, you wouldn't want to have it happening in a precinct over here that wasn't selected for the audit. And also, unlike traditional audits, a risk limiting audit is designed to escalate to additional rounds of auditing and ultimately a full hand recount if discrepancies are discovered. So if we find that there's an issue, we're going to draw an additional sample size, and we'll keep doing that until we meet our level of confidence. Okay, so you all know that because you either were interested enough in the benefits of risk limiting audits that you decided to ask the State Board of Elections in law to do a pilot this year. So they, under their leadership, a working group was formed. I got to be participate in that, along with a number of counties that will be participating in the pilot. So Anderson County, Fayette County, Henderson County, Johnson, Kenton, and Madison counties. In addition to the State Board of Elections staff, we have a member of the Secretary of State's office participating in that group, representatives from the various voting systems that are used here in Kentucky, and then former Secretary of State Trey Grayson. So what has the working group been doing? We've been meeting since the beginning of this year, and we started first with the goal of understanding different RLA terms. And I'm not going to give you all of those today. You can go read my guides if you want to really dig in. But a few that are important to understand. First one is the target contest. So it's that target contest, often chosen by the state, that drives the sample size. And that, well, I'm just going to leave it at that. Next one is the risk limit. This is a tricky term, even for me, to explain at times. So the risk limit is that maximum possible chance that your audit will not detect an incorrect election outcome, and that's a mouthful. It's often expressed as a percentage. So for example, if the risk limit is set at 5%, that means there's a 5% chance that the audit would not detect an incorrect outcome if there was one. Another way to think about that is there's a 95% chance that if there was an issue, the audit would detect that. And states that have adopted RLAs have set that risk limit anywhere from as low as 1% to 10% is fairly normal in a pilot. The next one is a sample size. So this is really important. This is the number of ballots that are going to be randomly selected for the counties to review. And the thing that I'll share with you here is that in our RLA, the sample size is driven by the margin of that target contest. So the closer the race is, obviously the more ballots we want to look at to feel confident about the outcome. The wider the margins of that race, the fewer we can examine and still reach that level of confidence. And then as a working group, we dove into the different methods that are used for risk limiting audits. So sometimes we think RLA is a singular thing. There are actually a variety of methods that can be used depending on the way that ballots are counted and the type of technology that's used. Here in Kentucky, the working group decided to do a ballot polling audit. This is the best way that I can explain it is through the idea of jelly beans. In a ballot polling audit, we're going to take a random sample of those ballots. We're going to hand count those, and we're going to be looking for a similar or greater margin in our sample to what was officially reported in the results. So if we think about jelly beans, right, we can reach in and we can grab several handfuls and count those, and we should come up with the same ratios that are there represented if we were to count all of the jelly beans in the jar together. Okay, so after we, as a working group, felt confident about some of the terms and definitions, we started thinking about the role of ballot organization, ballot tracking, and really ballot accounting. And this is sometimes overlooked when we talk about risk limiting audits and audits generally of our election system. So ballot accounting provides a way to consistently and accurately record the number of ballots in your possession at a given point in time and document any changes. I probably don't need to tell all of you why this is important, but ballot accounting, and by that I mean things like reconciliation forms, chain of custody forms, they really become the foundation of our audit's paper trail. And so if we can't feel confident about those, it's hard to feel confident about the audit. It's the way that we ensure votes have not been dropped or lost or added as a result of human error or some failure of the voting equipment. It ensures the ballot record remains complete and intact from the moment ballots are cast all the way through the audit. And it's evidence that our ballot record is trustworthy. And this is really important. And this, honestly, is the most time-consuming part is the most time-consuming part for local jurisdictions as they're working on this type of audit. And one of the key pieces here is what we call a ballot manifest. So we spent a lot of time as a working group talking about this and what it might look like here in Kentucky. A ballot manifest is a log or document that shows how many ballot cards your voting system scanned, where they're located. It can be a simple spreadsheet, but the important thing is it's created independent of the voting system. So RLAs assume we cannot trust the voting system, and we need a way to independently verify the number of ballots that have been scanned and counted and where they're located. And so we just looked closely at different seals and labels and things like that to sort of understand, based on the processes and procedures used in the pilot counties, what would be most useful for populating that ballot manifest. And this is an example of what the ballot manifest will look like for this pilot. You can see here it will indicate the different counties that are participating, where those batches of ballots are coming from, and how many ballots we might find in that batch. So one thing, if you haven't picked up on it already, when we talk about RLAs, there's quite a bit of math that gets performed. And part of that is this method of auditing was developed by a statistician. And so it can be made easier sometimes with software in terms of determining the sample size, randomly selecting the ballots for audit, accounting for discrepancies, calculating if that risk limit has been met. For our pilot, your pilot, in December, we're going to use a pretty simple spreadsheet, and I really applaud the state board for going in this direction. It's simple, it's free, most importantly, it's transparent. So all of those math formulas and calculations won't be behind source code. It will be right there for anybody to review and examine. So I'm really excited about that. Okay, so now let's talk about the audit itself. When they get ready to do the audit, counties will individually send to the state board their ballot manifests and their summary results report. This is the only part of RLAs that anybody gets excited about. For some reason, people like to roll dice. But in order to achieve our random sampling, we do a dice roll, and that's just to ensure that it truly is random, that nobody has an idea ahead of time or can game the system in any way in terms of which ballots are selected for audit. And then we use that seed, that random seed that's created as a result of that dice roll, in something called a pseudo-random number generator. And it selects then randomly from that ballot manifest the ballots that will be audited. We'll then create lists for, we'll refer to them as audit boards for purposes of the pilot. This will probably be staff members from the county that'll indicate which ballots need to be retrieved and where they can find those. They'll retrieve those, they'll sit down, they'll tally those ballots. They'll come up with results for each candidate in the contest that's been selected. And then those will be submitted back to the state board. They'll plug those into our spreadsheet here and be compared against the summary results to determine if the risk limit has been satisfied. If it hasn't, if there were discrepancies discovered, then an additional round of auditing would take place. And then I want to just end with an outline of some of the goals for this pilot. So it is a pilot. This is not an official formal audit. The goals were to create a safe environment for county officials to have a hands-on experience, to learn how RLAs work, to become familiar with all of the terms and definitions and procedures of an RLA, to develop or help develop an RLA method that works in Kentucky. And this is often a long-term process. So there may be another pilot that takes place before a recommendation is made. And also to think about the specific procedures, type of ballot manifest that might work not just in the pilot counties, but will work in every county, regardless of their size or their technology in the state of Kentucky. With that, I will end and open it up for questions.
Anybody have questions? Representative Nemus.
Yes, thank you. I think this looks really good. I'm excited about it and look forward to the results. I do have a question. Are you aware of the recounts we've had this past primary, and how does that weave in together with this, if at all? And what is your comment about the outcome of those recounts?
It's a great question. I'll probably skip commenting on the recounts themselves, but I think as we mature as a field, and I say we collectively, nationally, start to think about post-election audits, and especially this type of audit, that, as I said, if there are issues, escalates essentially to a full hand recount. So I think in the future, as we get more comfortable with it, it may be worth re-looking at recount laws and requirements. And maybe just to add, to make sure it's clear, when the first time I did this type of RLA in Colorado, I actually had 5 recounts of my own that then I had to turn around. Here we had examined all these ballots, provided evidence that the outcome was correct, then had it be, by law, there was a trigger that 0.5% had to go back and recount 5 races. And so it felt a little bit like, gosh, we're just repeating what we just did a few days ago. So I think there's certainly an opportunity to look at changing recount requirements.
Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hey, Richard. Can you just, for the pilot program, and we're implementing this program this coming election, general election, right? What is it? One race in a precinct per county, or what exactly will be counted?
We will be looking at the U.S. Senate race in those 6 counties, and we'll be. Oh,
turn your mic
I'm sorry,
on.
I've got it on. I just don't. I'm not up close enough. We'll be looking at the U.S. Senate race because it's on everyone's ballot, and that's the first thing that we'll do, and we'll evaluate that from there. But this is one race this time in the pilot program.
Just to follow up real quick.
Yeah.
So in those 6 counties will be a total ballot count of the 6 counties, a precinct, a random precinct, or just give us little details on it.
It will be done randomly. It'll be a sample from those. Like Ms. Morrell said, we'll generate that and give it to each county based on how many, because each county is not going to have the same number of scanners. As you know, Kentucky will the 30-day impounding period after the elections. Each of those, every ballot will still be in the scanners, locked into the tubs. We'll actually use those. You saw the picture of the containers on the Ms. Morrell's presentation. Actually, Kentucky will leave those alone, and those will remain in the scanner, and that's how we'll break those seals for the first time when we get ready to do the RLA.
Thank you.
Senator Southworth.
I have a few questions on some specifics here. On page number 14 or slide number 14, whatever this is, it was talking about the ballot manifest and making your spreadsheet, determining where they're located and so forth. And you said we're going to assume that we can't trust the machine, so we have to make it separate from all of that. Then I didn't hear anything on how we get those numbers, because right now, at least my understanding is you have, how many ballots did we hand out, but we don't actually track which machines those got put into, because the machines themselves have their little tracker counter on them. But if we're not trusting the machine counter, then how are we getting that ballot manifest created?
Yeah, that's a great question. I appreciate that. So there are a number of different ways that we can do that verification. One way would be to take all of those ballots and hand count them, right? Piece count. So I piece count and say I have 100 ballots in this container. Another way would be to verify. So if you are familiar with the reconciliation forms that might be used to verify, we checked in 100 voters. Our machine showed we scanned 100 ballots. Therefore, we can make a good assumption that there are 100 pieces of paper or 100 cards in this container.
So you're saying we wouldn't necessarily maybe know for sure how our ballot manifest is going to look unless we did the assumption method. You could technically cut the seal, pull them out, count the total ballots, and say, oh, well, there's 100. So that count. But then we don't know. I'm just trying to figure out. It's almost like a cart and a horse thing.
Right. So the ballot manifest gets created after the ballots have been scanned, after all those containers have returned back to the county facility. Part of that, and I apologize for leaving out some of the details, includes things like verifying the seals. The security seals are on there to ensure they haven't been tampered. All the normal things that they would do in checking in those containers. Some, in fact, will have some sort of label or indicator giving that container an identification number and then that total count. And those numbers from that container labeling system or organization system then get transferred to the ballot manifest. And we actually draw the random sample from the ballot manifest. And so that's important because we've had some sort of human verification by the local authority of that total quantity. We're relying on that versus relying on some sort of report or output from the voting system of what that total quantity should be.
Mr. Chairman, I have a follow-up.
Yes.
Okay. I'm on page 16 now, and I either...
Yeah.
Oh.
How do we get to that slide? Is it?
She can put it, I think.
You can do the arrows, I think. Yeah.
It's the ballot manifest, ballot scanning. There's different...
There, you just passed it, I think.
Yeah, that one. On the bottom left, it says our beginning count is 100 minus 3 removed for duplication. The final count was 98. And I'm trying to figure out, did I miss something, or is there different math involved that there's an extra ballot? Or can you explain this slide better?
Yep. And these are just examples. This may not be indicative in any way of the labeling or batch tracking forms used in the counties here. In this particular example, this is showing a batch tracking form for absentee ballots. And so it indicates that we started with 100, we removed 3, perhaps they were damaged or needed to go to the duplication board, and we now have 98. And so it's that 98, that number, that's getting transferred to the ballot manifest.
So you're saying there's 97 ballots in your hands now, or if you removed 3,
it's showing that I don't know how to do math.
Okay,
is what it's showing.
The final question I had was on page number 23 when you're talking about retrieving your ballots and you have the ballots numbered on this little sample spreadsheet. My question is, are we talking about adding or using like a serial number system, or how do we have these ballots numbered to be able to tell? Like, I mean, ballots in a machine are a giant mess. I mean, so how are you sorting these out?
They are a mess. So there isn't any sorting. When they get those containers back, really the only thing they'll do is make sure that they're all in a neat stack and face up. Again, I've given you really simplistic sort of examples here that I've used in a hands-on demo I've done before. But if we look at, let's take the second row on the left. So container A, scanner 1, batch number 2, ballot number 4, right? So in that example, I'm going to go to the container that's labeled A. Most likely here, we actually won't have a scanner ID, but it'll be rather a batch ID potentially. I'm going to find batch number 2, and I'm going to count down, actually, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm going to pull out the 4th ballot. Now, this is a really simple example. Most likely, or it is possible or likely that we could have a batch that has several hundred ballots in it. So it is going to be a time-consuming process where they have to count down to the 23rd ballot, the 47th ballot, and maybe the 93rd ballot and pull those out. And those are what get recorded on the tabulation, the tally sheet.
Thank you very much for your explanation.
Representative Miller.
I may need a little bit higher level understanding before I can understand the details. Okay, if from the Board of Election standpoint, if the pilot goes well, what's the next step? I'm trying to understand, is this going to replace something you do now, or is this a new thing you want legislation to say every Board of Election has to do a risk limiting audit, or any race that's under 5% margin, has to have a risk. Tell me where we're headed with this.
After this pilot program, we'll take the results, compile a report, and we'll provide it to the General Assembly. Legislation would guide us in that way. Again, we may decide that maybe we need another year to do another pilot, but that'll be in your hands as far as legislation on which way you guide us in that from the reporting that we give you.
But that's
it is a new process. This is completely new. I mean,
Mr. Chairman, if I could follow up. So you do a pilot, Board of Elections says, yeah, this is great. So you're not going to make a recommendation to the General Assembly on what you want?
Yes, we will provide the report and a recommendation to you.
Okay, so do you think you're going to require every Board of Election, county Board of Election, to do a risk limiting audit, or is it all races under 5% or 0.5%? Where do you think you're going to head after you prove this? Because I was in a younger life CPA and did auditing and confidence levels. I'm very confident with that, or comfortable with that. But just where are you headed exactly?
One direction would be that the state as a whole would take this on, and 120 counties that would do this, because, and Ms. Morrell can explain a little bit about what she talked about before, how that.
Sure. What are other people doing?
Yeah. What other counties, what other states and jurisdictions are doing? Yes.
Yeah. So I think we want. Let me back up just a minute. Sorry. Ideally, you want to have a race or a contest that's on every ballot if you're going to do this statewide. So really, we're talking about a state or federal contest that would be subject to auditing, or at least be the target race that we audit. So in order to do that, in order to feel confident about making a determination on the outcome of that state or federal race, we really want to examine all the ballots from all the counties that participated. So in that way, it's kind of an all or nothing. There are some states, so Ohio, for example, makes risk limiting audits an option. There's one county in Ohio that does that. They can only audit races that are wholly included in their county, so that limits them to just auditing county races. If we go back to which race that is, there are a number of factors that you can consider. There are states that have put that into usually administrative rulemaking, not into statute. Maybe things like looking at races that are highly contested, races that are close. You may give some consideration to geographic proximity. So there are some variables that the state board can consider when making a determination of what that target contest would be. And often it's something that might be made. There are some states that choose to make that determination ahead of time so that they're not biased by the outcome. So there are different approaches to that.
Okay. Thank you.
Senator Mills.
So I think I'm kind of like Representative Miller here. I've got to get a little wider understanding of this. So is the audit actually done on site at each county? It does not require any kind of mailing back and forth between the Board of Elections or anything of that nature. And then also, in the past, when you've seen these done, what's the timing? How long does this generally take? And is it several days after the election, or that the next day, or how does that work?
Good. As far as they will be done in their jurisdictions, so ballots won't be moved around or machines or anything like that. We'll probably coordinate a little bit. We might do a Zoom call that day, so if we do everybody at the same time on the same day, so that we can get through that process. We're working through that, and as we're finishing up the election, we're getting our final thoughts together for this. Again, this won't take place until after the impounding period. As far as the second half of the question, I'll let Ms. Morrell finish that up.
Sure. So this is actually, we talk about pros and cons of this type of audit. This is actually one of the things that election officials don't like. In a fixed percentage audit, we know exactly how many ballots we're going to audit and how many people we need to do it and how long it's going to take. In an RLA, that's going to vary because, as I mentioned, that sample size could be bigger or smaller depending on the outcome. So to answer your question, it varies. If there is a tight race and we have to look at a lot of ballots, It can take anywhere from a couple of days to a full week if for some reason that audit needs to escalate to additional rounds of sampling. So in the best of circumstances, it can be done in a day. I've seen it take 3 days. Again, and there are some other variables in there too, the risk limit. So if you decide to set the risk limit higher or lower, that again impacts that sample size. So it is a little bit difficult to make a decision about allocating resources and time. I will tell you, states that have adopted this as their formal method of auditing have often had to move back their certification period. So ideally, right, we want to perform this audit prior to certification. If there's an issue, we want to be able to identify that issue and make changes if it would affect the outcome of a race. That means we need to do it prior to certification. So there have been states that have had to move back that certification deadline by a day or two to accommodate the length of time it takes to review those ballots.
Very good. You answered my follow-up question right there. Thank you.
Let me jump in real quick. Representative Smith is next, but who will it be doing? Will it be the county clerks that do it in, say, Harrison or wherever we're doing it one at? Is that the deal? Is that
For this pilot program, it'll be the clerk staff. They will do the same thing that it's a test method. We're doing party parity. One Republican, one Democrat will be the auditors that will look at each ballot, just as we would do in a regular normal election. But right now, it will be the staff. There will be opportunities for people to observe this. We'll make that available so that we can be completely transparent. We want to see how this works. Another reason we've selected the counties we've selected. There's a large county, a medium-sized county, and a small county, so we can see how that affects their office and their flow. And also, we took 3 from one vendor and 3 from the other vendors, so both Kentucky vendors are associated in this, and I'm sure they'll want to be part of watching what happens, because if this works and it goes well and you all move forward with anything, we'd have to implement this across the state. So,
Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This question, I guess, for the executive director. Since we've been discussing, had a couple of meetings on this election reform, there's only been one area that I've been really concerned about, and that's early voting. I'm still a little bit maybe in the area of really not knowing specifics about it, but maybe I'm misunderstanding, and I would like to clear it up while you're here, if I can, because it's going on right now. It started 45 days prior to the election day. We're in an open election right now. And the absentee, as we call it, I consider it still a vote because of the portal. It's my understanding, and I want to just get it cleared up once and for all. I've talked to the chairman and a few people about it, other members. I know there's a criteria for early vote, going on absentee and getting on the portal, ordering your ballot, similar to what we'd done 2 years ago when we ran. It was a portal. We put a voter could put the information on his cell phone or her cell phone, order the ballot. It was mailed to their address. They voted it and could put it in a drop box or to the clerk's office. We kept that intact on the portal. Is that right? That's my understanding. My question is this. I looked at the qualifications for voting right now. One of the very first one, it reads you are advanced in age. It doesn't tell what the age is. So if you feel advanced at 20 or 30, 40, 50, it says disabled. We know what that incurs, or ill on election day. So if I think I'm going to have COVID on election day, I can go ahead and go on the portal. You're shaking yes, but let me finish my point. What's bothering me is not my area. I don't feel like I'd have that concern right now if I had a opponent in the fall, because I've not felt that type of a movement in my area of gathering, and we call them harvesting, organizations getting together, having meetings and saying, let's get our neighbors, let's get our family members to get on the portal, order their ballot, And you say, well, wait a minute, they got to meet the criteria. Well, that first one in itself, I don't know anybody could challenge in court without an age on that to say whether they felt like they were, up in age. And then whether I feel like I'm going to be sick coming up on election day. I mean, that's election day, whether I can determine if I'm going to be sick on election day, it's over with. So if I feel like I'm going to be sick or not feel like going that day, I can go ahead and go on the portal and order my ballot. Not only can I order my ballot, but it's mailed to me. I can fill it out and I put it in a drop box. I don't even have to take it or mail it anywhere. I can go by and just drop it in. My concern is this. It's a great bill. I voted for it. I think it goes a long ways. I know the intent is to try to keep from having corruption in an election. But this area right here still concerns me because I think it's open for harvesting, for groups. We got a strong pro-life, pro-choice vote going on right now, and people are really emotional about it, both sides. And I can see organizations, and if I was running statewide, I'd make sure I hired a good consultant. And I'm not sure that a consultant would advise me to find large areas of votes and to start working them early. If he was doing or she was doing her job to try to get the early vote out and get them committed. Am I wrong in looking at it at the portal this way? Is it open for that? Or tell me that it's not, you're totally wrong, because the old absentee ballot was I would have to mail in for a form. It would be mailed to me. I'd fill the form out, mail it back in, and then a ballot would be mailed to me. We'd have two transactions that I would have to go through to vote on an absentee. This one, if I'm correct, and tell me if I'm right or wrong, that the portal is open today. I can go on today and order my ballot and say, well, I feel like I'm not going to feel good on election day, or I feel like I'm too old to really get around. I don't think I'm going to feel good, feel like getting out of the house that day, and use that as my excuse and go ahead and order the ballot. Now, just kind of correct me if I'm even off message or if I'm even close to being right on getting on the portal and ordering my ballot today. Could you kind of tell me if I'm right or wrong?
So if I understand what you're asking about the excuses as someone
I just read you the top one, yeah.
Logs into the portal. Those excuses, when we prepared the absentee ballot portal to open 45 days ago, actually today, 45 days ago, we took those excuses directly from legislation. Mm-hmm. And so the wording on those are exactly what
I'm not challenging you today. I'm sorry.
Right.
If you're taking it as a challenge, I'm not.
No,
I'm asking you, am I correct in saying that I can go on the portal today, order my ballot, it'd be mailed to my house, I can vote it and take it by and put it in a drop box today?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's
yes.
Let's go to the. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
I know this has taken up a lot of time, but I really do think we've talked about, I think it's an important issue. Going to the consultant, do you see any problems with that? With that, what I've stated, what I said, the purpose, the reason, and you could use just the first excuse and voting this way by being an outside looking in.
Well, I administered elections in Utah and Colorado where we mail all voters a mail ballot. And if they don't feel comfortable voting that, they have the option to go and vote in person, either early or on election day. We provide drop boxes. So I've watched it work. So I may be a little bit biased, I guess, in what I'm saying in my response. I've watched it work well in both of those states. There's certainly a number of security layers that are in place to ensure nobody has the opportunity to vote twice or vote somebody else's ballot. We've certainly had instances where we've identified individuals and sent those to the district attorney's office, but they're very few. In my jurisdiction of about 400,000 voters, in 2016 we had about 370,000 of those vote. We identified 6 that we refer to the district attorney. So that's, so I may have a little bit different perspective, I guess, on that.
Okay, I appreciate
Sir,
time.
if I might add something, As of yesterday, there was approximately 70-something thousand applications applied out of 3.5 million voters in Kentucky. So it hasn't been to the numbers that we've had before. So.
What? Go ahead, Representative Amos.
That was my question. So 70,000, how does that measure up to pre-COVID numbers? Seems to me, and I've represented boards of elections across Kentucky, it seems to me that 70,000 is mighty high compared to what we had pre-COVID.
I know that it's quite a bit higher than we had in the primary. We actually looked at the difference. I don't recall exactly. So the primary this year, pre-COVID numbers, unfortunately, I haven't looked at that, but I'd be happy to look at it.
Yeah,
and
Mr. Chairman,
get
I would
back with
request
you.
that before the end of this week that we would be getting the numbers from pre-COVID numbers from 2000 to today. Each election, I think those are very simple to get. I think those are on the website, might be on the website even, because it seems to be a pretty, to me, and I could be wrong, but I'm just extrapolating from the individual counties I've represented in trying to go statewide with that, and that might not be the right thing to do, but 70,000 seems very, very high, and so I just I'd like to know those numbers. Thank you.
I will add that probably tomorrow, since the portal for absentee closes this evening, either by tomorrow or maybe early Thursday, we will have the absentee ballot numbers on our website. So you'd even be able to go for this election, and we can get you those other numbers from the past.
Representative Decker.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a few questions. Just to clarify the questions that were asked a minute ago, the reasons for the excuses. Am I correct that the advanced age is a term used in the Americans with Disabilities Act, and that it's been defined by courts and the Act in relationship to the Act, so that is something that is related to keeping us compliant with the Americans with Disabilities Act?
I believe that's correct, if I'm not mistaken, but I would want to verify, but I believe you're right.
And the sick on the day of the election is also a matter of complying with the Americans with Disabilities Act, ensuring that they can vote if they have a condition that they know will make them sick on election day. Not just thinking I might be sick, but these are matters. When we drafted the bill that had these in them, those were matters we looked at federal law. We have to be compliant with the Americans with Disabilities Act. Is that correct? I mean, I know it's what we thought about, but those are
yes,
correct.
Yes, ma'am. Those were part of the discussion.
And on the ballot harvesting, one of the things that I think, if you can confirm this, that the portal lends to ensuring against that is that the portal gives a barcode to every request for an absentee ballot and when it is returned. So that one of the ways that helps against ballot harvesting is if we get back a barcode that is a batch of them from the same location on the same time, that would be an indication of ballot harvesting, which was made a felony in HB 574. Is that correct?
I'm going to let Richard speak.
I would say that the barcode is for a tracking system.
Mm-hmm.
If they were to be brought in and put in a drop box, they are recording the number counts that they get in the drop box, but if they don't immediately scan all those together, they wouldn't, but some counties probably do, and that would be something that you could pick up in the data.
Okay. I have a question about the risk limiting audit. Why did you decide to pre-announce? I understand why you chose the counties you did, but why did you pre-announce that they were chosen?
Just as a transparency measure. I mean, we wanted to reach out and find the counties that were we needed to find some that were the large counties, the medium county, and the small. We actually asked for those in advance, and we just released it because we were being transparent on the whole process, what we were doing.
So I have heard criticism that it just allows everybody else to just relax. They're not going to have a risk limiting audit. But will the Attorney General still have his audits?
Well, in that we're confusing the two things.
Okay.
The risk limiting audit for the pilot program, we had to be educated on this, and we had to come together as a working group. So the 6 counties were involved in the working group and figuring out what method we would use, because this is a learning experience. I mean, this is going to affect their offices, and it's going to take resources to do this. So we needed to test that, and we needed to have, but more importantly, we needed to all be educated on the process. And that's what this several months we've been going through and meeting together as a group. The Attorney General will still do their audits separate of this.
And then my final question
Yes.
is there anything those counties can do to get ready for this? You've talked about the jelly beans and how they won't know who, but is there anything they can do to skew the results by knowing that they're going to be audited, that they can fix in order to have a good result?
Yeah, so before I answer that, I just want to add one thing to the question that you addressed to Mr. House, and that is the outcome of this pilot audit is going to be non-binding. This isn't an official audit. This is simply a learning exercise to inform what will be potentially may become the official method of auditing. So keep that in mind. So we go back to the dice rolling. That's actually where we ensure that there's no way anybody can know ahead of time which ballots will be selected from which containers or batches or precincts or scanners. So that manifest that I mentioned, if you think about one row of data represents one container, and in there may be hundreds of ballots. Essentially what happens is that gets extrapolated, so now we have 143 lines of data. And when we do that, we create that random seed and we use this pseudo-random number generator. It will go through that whole, kind of think of it like a clock, right? And it will decide, okay, here's where I'm going to start, and I'm going to choose this one, and then I'm going to randomly advance 10, and then maybe 7, and then maybe 12, and it continues to do that till it draws the whole sample. What's great about it being a pseudo-random number generator is anybody can take that random seed and replicate that, take that same ballot manifest that the state board will have, and ensure that those were the ballots that were selected. So it's a very transparent way to do it, but it also prevents anybody from gaming the system or knowing ahead of time what's going to be selected. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
And Representative Blanton.
Thank you. Thank you all for your presentation. I'm glad to see that we're taking a look at this. Obviously a concern to all of us. For me, my big concern, going back to Representative Smith from my area, is the mail-in ballots. I know you've had success, but you're talking about areas of 400,000, I think you said. I think the smaller the population, the easier it is to have inappropriate influences. And in my region, that seems to be through mail-in balloting right now. Years back, it was done more at the polls. Now it's migrated towards that. I know that one of my clerks in a small county I spoke to over the weekend, she's already had over 400 mail-in ballots received, which is high numbers for a very small county. And these tend to be higher in local elections. And those are easier manipulated, I think. And I know we have to provide opportunities to make sure everybody gets a chance to vote. I'm not opposed to that. I just think we have to really, really be cautious and take a very hard, long look at these mail-in ballots, because that is the easiest way. You talked about how they're mailed in, but let me tell you how they're treated in my area. So I go to you, not me. John Doe comes to you, and I'm going to give you $50 for your vote, and I'm going to get online and help you apply for your online ballot. You're going to apply for it, and then you're going to call me when it gets at your house. And then I'm going to come to your house, and I'm going to watch you fill out that ballot. I may even circle it in myself and let you sign it, and we're going to seal it up, and then we're going to deliver it to the mail. Or the last election, we had a local candidate that there is photograph evidence that was coming in with with, the grocery Walmart type bags full of paper ballots and dropping them off at the drop box. And so those are the concerns for people in my area, that as if maybe their votes aren't counting because it's getting taken from them through manipulative practices. And so we just want to ensure that it's done safely and fairly for everyone. And I hope that that you all will take a stringent look at the mail-in absentees more than just run them through the machine itself. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
A lot of those actions you just described are against the law, right? Yeah. So you're saying they're just not getting caught?
They're only legal till you don't get caught. Till you get caught, I guess.
Some of them are pretty strict penalties if they do get caught. Representative Gooch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question, and this really doesn't pertain to Kentucky. And when we look back at the 2020 election, certainly the presidential election, we know that there are certain things that would indicate that, yes, definitely there has been fraud here. We know that probably no precinct will ever vote 100% of the people that are registered in that precinct. And yet we've heard reports in some other states where you actually had more than 100% of people that actually voted as far as the number of registered voters in that precinct or in that state or in that city. We've also heard that there were instances where the state mailed out 200,000 maybe or whatever a number of absentee ballots, but yet they got in 300,000. I mean, those kind of things would be easily verifiable. There would be things that would certainly indicate fraud. Can someone tell me that those things did not happen?
Every canvas board or jurisdiction that I've ever worked with has a requirement that when they certify or canvass that election, the two things they look at are the number of voters that were given credit for voting and the number of ballots that were counted. And if those numbers are off, meaning there are, as you indicated, more voters voted or more ballots counted than voters voting, or vice versa, or more voters than are registered in that precinct, that's a red flag that most canvas boards would then not certify and would probably investigate to find out why those were off. And I'm not aware of any state or local canvas boards that were able to identify the discrepancies that you just mentioned.
Okay, thank you.
That didn't happen in Kentucky, right?
Certainly not.
Good. Yeah. Any other questions? Well, thank you, Ms. Worrell, for coming, and you guys at the desk, and meeting adjourned.